They say revenge is best served cold, but I have learned something different after 62 years of watching proud men ruin themselves. The best revenge is not served at all. It is left on the table, untouched, while the person across from you picks it up, signs it, stamps it, and hands it back, thinking he has won. My son-in-law did not just insult me. He did not just embarrass me in front of people who worked for my company. He fired me from the company I owned, with a smile on his face, while telling everyone in the room that old men like me were the reason business moved too slowly. He thought I was a tired warehouse worker. He thought I needed that paycheck. He thought my silence meant weakness. What he did not know was that every door he walked through, every chair he sat in, every paycheck he approved, and every title on his office wall existed because I had allowed it. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave like decent human beings. They simply chose wrong. Drop a comment before we begin, and make sure you subscribe, because stories like this are not about loud anger. They are about patience, timing, and the quiet pleasure of watching arrogance meet paperwork. My name is Frank Colton, and if you passed me on the street in Beckley, West Virginia, you would not look twice. I drive a 2006 Toyota Tacoma with a cracked passenger mirror. I wear old flannel shirts because they are comfortable. My watch cost less than dinner at a nice restaurant. I grow tomatoes behind my house and argue with squirrels like a retired man with nothing better to do. That is the version of me most people see, and I like it that way. The version they do not see is the one printed on legal filings, bank documents, and ownership records. For 22 years, I have owned Colton Marsh Industries, a manufacturing and logistics company that moves product across 14 states and employs just under 4,000 people. Last year, our revenue would have made my neighbors choke on their morning coffee, but I never cared for showing wealth. I built my life around staying invisible. My daughter Lacey never understood that part of me. She was bright, direct, and full of fire, and when she brought home Clayton Hale, I saw the kind of man who smiled beautifully and measured every room by who had power in it. He shook my hand like I was harmless. At the time, I let him believe it. I did not dislike him then. I only watched him carefully. Because fathers know that charm can be a suit men wear until the bill comes due. Mine had not come due yet, but I could already hear footsteps moving toward the door with very clean shoes. Lacey married Clayton 18 months after bringing him home, and I tried harder than anyone to believe my first instincts were only the suspicion of an old father. He was polished, educated, ambitious, and careful with his words when Lacey was in the room. He brought flowers to my house, complimented my tomatoes, asked about my back when I carried groceries, and called me sir in a way that sounded respectful until you listened closely enough to hear the performance underneath. Still, Lacey loved him, and love makes fathers negotiate with their own doubts. I told myself he was young. I told myself power had not tested him yet. Then I made a decision that now feels generous and foolish in equal measure. I let Clayton become Chief Executive Officer of Colton Marsh Industries. He never knew I was behind it. As far as Clayton understood, an executive search firm noticed him. A board interviewed him, and a large private company chose him because he was brilliant. That was partly true. He had the numbers, he had the training, he understood distribution, cost control, contracts, and negotiation better than most men twice his age. I did not hand him the chair because he was my son-in-law. I opened the door because he had earned enough of a chance to walk through it. But I also wanted to see who he became when nobody in the building knew he was married to the owner's daughter, and nobody knew the quiet old man in the cracked truck was the owner himself. For the first few months, Clayton impressed everyone. He reworked vendor terms, tightened a wasteful route system, and saved the company millions before summer ended. Board members liked him. Department heads respected him. Lacey was proud of him, and I was proud for her. Then the small signs started. He stopped asking questions and started issuing judgments. He spoke kindly upward and sharply downward. He learned names of investors, but forgot names of mechanics who had kept our machines alive for 20 years. During one visit, I heard him tell a supervisor that loyalty was not a business model. Another time, he laughed when an older driver struggled with new tracking software and said some people were built for yesterday. That sentence stayed with me. By winter, Clayton had begun using the word deadweight. He said it in meetings, in emails, in performance reviews. Deadweight meant anyone who resisted his speed. Deadweight meant anyone old enough to remember how the company survived before laptops and dashboards. Deadweight meant the people who had built the floor under his expensive shoes. That was when I understood something painful. Clayton was not failing because he lacked talent. He was failing because talent had made him believe character was optional. And a company can survive bad numbers for a while. It cannot survive a leader who forgets that people are not tools. That truth finally pushed me out of hiding and into motion. I decided to enter my own company as nobody important. Not through the front lobby, not with a board badge, not with a lawyer beside me. I went in through the warehouse entrance on a gray Tuesday morning, wearing work boots, faded jeans, and the same brown jacket I used when fixing fence posts behind my house. The badge said, Frank Coleman, Temporary Operations Support. Only 2 people in the building knew the truth. My general counsel, who looked like she had swallowed a lemon when I told her the plan, and Earl Maddox, the warehouse director who had been with me since the first year and knew better than to argue once I had made up my mind. Earl handed me a clipboard and whispered, "This is either brilliant or stupid." I told him, most profitable ideas start as both. For 3 days, I listened. That is the advantage of being underestimated. People speak freely around a man they think has no power. Workers told me Clayton had cut safety reviews to make shipping numbers look better. A floor manager admitted 2 senior employees had been pushed into early retirement because Clayton called them expensive history. I watched one young supervisor tremble before entering the executive elevator, then straighten his shirt like he was going to court. The fear in that building was not loud. It was organized, polished, and hidden under productivity charts. By the 4th morning, I had seen enough to know Clayton was not just arrogant. He was dangerous to the culture I had spent 2 decades protecting. The confrontation happened in the main distribution bay. Clayton came down with 3 executives behind him, wearing a navy suit so sharp it looked offended by the dust in the air. A shipment delay had triggered his temper, and I was standing beside a loading report when he demanded to know who had approved the old process still being used on Dock 4. I said calmly that the old process existed because the new system missed mixed freight exceptions. He stared at me as if a broom had started speaking. Then he smiled. Not a warm smile, a public one. He asked my name. I told him Frank. He said, "Frank, men like you are exactly why this company needs to move forward." People went silent. Clayton enjoyed that silence. He told me I was outdated, slow, and too comfortable defending broken habits. I explained the numbers. He did not listen. He pointed toward the exit and said I was done, effective immediately. Fired in front of drivers, clerks, managers, and executives who all suddenly found the floor fascinating. I looked at him for a long moment, then handed him the clipboard. "Good luck with Dock 4, I said. Then I walked out. If you are still listening, hit the like button and subscribe, because sometimes the quiet walk out is not defeat. Sometimes it is the sound before the trap closes. I did not drive home angry. Anger is loud and wasteful, and I had work to do. I drove 3 blocks to a small diner where the coffee tasted like burnt courage, sat in the back booth, and opened the folder my counsel had prepared before I ever stepped into that warehouse. Inside were employee complaints, safety reports, altered performance reviews, retirement pressure emails, and one termination form with my temporary name already entered into the system. Clayton had moved fast, too fast. That was his great flaw. He believed speed made him untouchable, when really, it only left clearer tracks. By noon, I had every document I needed copied, time-stamped, and routed to the people who understood what quiet meant in my world. I called Lacey after lunch. I hated that call before I made it. No father enjoys telling his daughter that the man she married has shown his true face in public. She answered cheerful at first, then went silent as I told her what happened. Not all of it, just enough. She asked if Clayton knew. I said no. She asked if I was hurt. I said only my patience. Then her voice changed. It became smaller, wounded, and controlled. "Dad," she said, "what do you need me to do?" That nearly broke me. Because even in that moment, she was not defending him. She was not defending me either. She was trying to stand where truth stood, and that is a hard place for a daughter and wife to be. I told her to say nothing, not to Clayton, not to his parents, not to anyone. I told her this was not a marriage argument yet. It was a leadership failure first, and leadership failures had to be handled where they happened. She understood immediately, which told me more than I wanted to know. There had been other signs at home, little comments, little dismissals, little moments where Clayton treated kindness like softness. Lacey admitted he had started speaking about my simple life with embarrassment. He had told her once that her father was sweet, but not exactly someone who understood real pressure. I almost laughed. Real pressure built the roof over his head. By 5 that evening, the board had received a notice for an emergency meeting the next morning. The subject line was Operational Risk Review. Clayton saw it as a chance to justify his cleanup campaign. I saw it as a mirror. The next day, he would walk into that room ready to explain why he fired Frank Coleman. Then Frank Colton would walk in after him. He would learn that a company is not protected by removing old voices. It is protected by listening before pride makes a fool of you. And my daughter would finally see whether her husband loved truth enough to survive it, or only loved power when it bowed to him. Some lessons need witnesses, and Clayton had chosen the perfect room for his own education tomorrow. Clayton entered the boardroom at 9 sharp, carrying a tablet and the confident expression of a man prepared to defend progress. I waited outside until he began speaking. Through the glass, I saw him standing at the end of the table, explaining that decisive leadership required removing resistance wherever it appeared. He called my firing an example. He said Frank Coleman represented an outdated mindset that slowed modernization. Then I opened the door. Every board member stood. Clayton stopped mid-sentence. For 3 seconds, he looked annoyed that the fired warehouse man had interrupted him. Then he saw the chairman step aside from me, saw my general counsel place a folder at my seat, and saw his own name on the review packet in front of every director. I sat at the head of the table and said, "Continue, Clayton. Tell us more about the man you fired." His face emptied. The room was quiet enough to hear the air system. I introduced myself properly for the first time. Frank Colton, founder and sole owner of Colton Marsh Industries, your employer, your appointing authority, and until yesterday, the temporary operations worker you dismissed without review. Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. Clayton gripped the back of a chair. He looked at me, then at the board, then at Lacey, who had entered behind me and stood near the door with tears in her eyes, but her chin lifted. That sight did more damage to him than any document could. I opened the folder. I did not shout. I read. Reduced safety checks, retaliatory transfers, pressured retirements, dismissive emails about senior staff, the illegal termination of a temporary worker who had raised a valid process concern. With each page, Clayton seemed to shrink inside his suit. When I finished, I told him talent had earned him the chair, but arrogance had made him unworthy of it. Effective immediately, he was suspended pending formal review. His executive access was frozen. His decisions from the last 90 days would be audited. If the board confirmed misconduct, his contract would be terminated for cause. Lacey stepped forward then. She did not yell either. She only said, "I needed to know who you were when power stopped flattering you. Now I do." That was the moment Clayton finally understood the cost. Not the job, not the title, her trust. He apologized, but apologies spoken after exposure never sound clean. Maybe one day he would become better. That was not mine to decide. I walked out of that room knowing my company would recover, because companies can heal when truth is allowed inside. As for me, I drove home in my old truck, watered my tomatoes, and kept wearing my flannel. Power does not need shine. It needs discipline. Quiet men build quietly, and foolish men mistake quiet for emptiness until the room answers back. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and join Dad's True Revenge for more stories where pride meets consequences and silence finally wins.